art studio. Stencils are used quite often in mixed media, but they definitely have a place with metal embossing as well. So why don't we see how we can use them in our metal embossing projects? So in this video, we are just going to look at the basic of how to use stencils in metal embossing. So what are we going to need? Of course, we are going to need our surfaces, which is a hard surface and a paper pad or a semi-soft surface. We are also going to need a pencil. You can also use a pen if you want to. That would be to trace your stencil. We are going to use a couple of Teflon tools, depending which one is working best for you. This one is not Teflon, it's a little plastic tool, but it's really nice to be able to utilize sort of the eraser part of this little tool. When it comes to refining or pushing it up against the stencil, the metal, this one you can also use a metal stylus or refiner. And then I think the tool that is most important or vital when it comes to working with stencils is your paper stumps. You can use different thicknesses, but it doesn't really matter, but paper stump is important. For this specific project, I'm definitely going to use a sanding block, and the reason for that is I am using colored aluminum where I'm just going to sand the color away. I'm going to use a roller. If you don't have a roller, you can just use your paper stump flat and to push it over, and it will have more or less the same effect as the roller. We are going to need painter's tape and any thickness, whichever you have handy, it's going to work. You're going to need that to adhere your stencil to your pewter or your metal that you're going to work with. For this specific project, I have chosen to work with the colored aluminum. So they come in a handy 5-pack, and these are the colors that is available in the pack. It's green, blue, the aluminum color, copper color, as well as a red color, and these sheets are 6 by 6. So yeah, they come in a handy pack like that. We're going to need our stencil, of course, and then also a substrate that we are going to adhere this to once this is done. And this one is 5 by 5. The stencil is also 5 by 5, so that when we're done with our stencil, we're just going to wrap it around the stencil design. We're just going to wrap the colored aluminum around that. So the first thing that we have to do is we need to get our stencil onto our color aluminum. Actually, before I'm going to adhere the stencil, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my blank and more or less center it on my piece of colored aluminum, and I'm just going to trace it. The reason for this is once I start working with it and I'm going to adhere it to the blank, then I sort of have my guidelines, and this will also help me with the placing of my stencil. Is it necessary to do this? No, you can always eyeball it afterwards. It really does not matter. Okay, so next, now that I have that guide, I am just going to place my stencil. So for this one, I'm going to place my stencil on the front. A stencil does not really have a front or a back, but it can make a difference to your design whether you put your stencil on the front or whether you put your stencil on the back of your metal. And especially that's why I've chosen to work with the colored aluminum, so that you can see the difference between that. I have this here. This is exactly the same stencil, just in a smaller version that I have. So this one, the stencil have been put on top of the pewter on the front when I was working with the stencil, and for this one the stencil was placed on the back of the pewter. So as you can see, excuse me, as you can see, it is the same stencil, but yet you have two different effects or two different designs, and that is why Stencils is so versatile. With this specific stencils, and there's quite a few out like them, you can definitely get two designs. With some of the other stencils, it is, you will get this design will look the same, but it will either be a embossed design or a de-emboss or low relief design, so depending what you would like to call that. So for now, the blue one, I am going to put it on the front of my colored aluminum, which means this is the effect that I'm going to have. So where the lines is going to be recessed or de-embossed, and where the openings is, that is going to be embossed. So I'm just going to tape this down, and again, you know, it all depends where you would like to tape and how secure you would like to tape this. Personally, I just do about 4 tacks. You can only do 1 for that matter, and that would work perfectly fine as well. So once this is done, we are going to move on to our first surface, which is our paper pad. And I'm just going to fold that over, otherwise it's going to keep on getting stuck to the paper pad. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to start tracing the stencil. So I'm literally just going to start from the one side, and I am going to outline each and every design that is here. So make sure that when you look at the bag, that you can see where you have traced that, because that is going to help you in the end to know where you have to push the design through. Okay, so I'm quickly going to continue on and finish tracing my stencil or cutting the design. It's almost done here. Do you have to trace or, you know, run your pencil through each and every little design that is here on your stencil? No, you don't need to. There is a different way that you can do this as well. And when I'm going to go on to the next stencil, I will show you a different way how to transfer the stencil design to where you can actually see your design on the back. So again, just make sure that everything has been traced. Yes, it looks like everything has been done. So the next step that we're going to do is we are going to remove our paper pad, and we are going to work on our hard surface. So I'm just going to work, because I do have this tile here that is a hard surface, so I'm just going to work on that as a hard surface. So the next step, once we've traced everything, you're going to take your paper stump and you are going to go in, and you are going to literally go into where you have made your trace designs, and you are going to retrace it, but you're also going to try and push the metal, whether it is the colored aluminum, whether it is pewter, copper, it doesn't matter which metal you're working with, you are going to push that right into, or as close to your stencil as what you can. You can also, once you've done with everything, what you can also do is you can you know, color them in, like coloring in. You can just flatten them. And the one thing I should have done is I should have started right in the center and work my way out to the back. That's actually the best practice. on a stencil like this, just because I've used the stencil quite a bit, it doesn't really make a difference. But when you work with stencils like, let's say a round mandala stencil, it can get really heavy when you work from the outside to the inside, because you are stretching your metal when you are working. So maybe, you know what, it is best practice to work sort of almost in a circle. Start with your inside and then go to the outside. Work your way out to the outside. That is actually the best way to do it. Sometimes we forget about the best practices, and then we just go, but try and get into the habit. It's sort of one of the basic rules. I wouldn't really call it a rule, but it's one of the basics with metal embossing, is to work from the center outwards. And again, you know, you can move it around as much as what you want, rather than, you know, trying to work around like that. Just keep on moving your metal with the stencil on. Keep on moving that around. Okay, so it looks like everything's been done here. And let's just give it a quick look over. Yep, it looks like everything has been pushed out. And again, so now you can just go in and you can flatten it again. Make sure that your surface is really clean, because there was something there and I picked it up on my metal, so make sure that that is clean. You can also use, this is where this little burnishing tool is come in handy. You can also use this and just flatten it. Okay, so the next step that you are going to do is, now we are going to use our Teflon Tip Tool. You can also use your stylus. It's what is going to work best for you, the one that you feel more comfortable with using. And we are going to go in and we are really going to push that up against the ends, and we are going to try and make sure that we get in all the little corners, because when you look at your, you know, the difference between the two tips here, this one is substantially thinner than what this one is. So although you did a lot of the pushing with your paper stump, you still were not able to get into all the little corners. Yes, you can try and go in. There is really thin little paper stumps that is out there that you can use and try and get in there. But to really get a sharp corner, it is going to be with either your stylus or a Teflon Tip Tool. The reason why I prefer working with a Teflon Tip Tool at this point is because it's really gliding over the metal. So when you work with your metal stylus, you can put some lubrication on here. And there's quite a few things that you can use. You can use some Vaseline. You can use a little bit of hand lotion. Some use some baby oil. So it's all different ones. Baby oil is actually nice because it really smells nice when you use the baby oil. So if you looked, when I was over there, what happened, I've actually slipped in there. But that can just be rectified once we are removing the stencil. So I'm just going to go ahead and I am going to make sure that I go into each and every one of these. I have outlined, or really pushed, there's not really outline, I have pushed everything up as close to the stencil as what I can. And that is really nice about working with stencils, because your design is confined within the stencil. So look at the back or at the front and just make sure that it has gone into all the little nookies, crannies, into all the corners. And there, I think I have missed one. Yes, when you look at the back, you can actually see there the one that I have missed, because sometimes when you work you don't notice it from the back, And again, there it has slipped. This happens quite often. You can do stencils where it doesn't happen once, and then the next stencil you put on, it is like almost every second one you have has that. Okay, so let's see. Yep, that looks good. Looks like all of them. So at this point, this is where I will definitely go in and flatten it out. I'm gonna go first over with this Teflon tool. It's at an angle. I don't know if you can really see there. It's at an angle, so it's really nice to flatten out any ridges that is there. So again, I'm going to go around and I am going to do this. You can also use this purple little stylus, and for that matter you can just use your paper stump. If you don't have any of that, just get in there and you are just going to flatten it. And there you can actually see when I work on the middle one how it has bunched up. When you actually work with your paper stump at an angle with the point, it works a little bit better. It's just sometimes really difficult. Oh, and there's one that I have completely missed. I haven't even done it with the paper stump the first time. Didn't notice it when I went over with my Teflon tool. So that would have been just a weird in the design. Yeah, now everything is done. Okay. So just go over and flatten all of these with your paper stump. If you have any of the other tools, you can do that. Use those tools as well. But for being a basic one, so these are the basic tools that you would need if you do start working with stencils. Also, when you work with the stencils, once you remove your stencil, you can add some additional designs to this. You can add designs within the stencil. You can either add it from the back and it will be embossed in the front. Okay, then and the another one that you can do is you can work from the back on the front, and you can really change a basic stencil into a very intricate design. So we can look at that later on you know, how you can change a stencil design into your own design. But for today, we are just going to stick with the bare basics. And that is starting from the center, which I keep on forgetting to do. And I know that's what you need to do, but sometimes I don't know where your memory is. I don't know if you have the same situation, that you know something and it's like, I just keep on forgetting to do it. And as you work with your paper stump, we'll go over again, and you see or you notice there's a piece that you haven't done, you can just go back in and you can do that. So this looks pretty good now for me. Of course, there is going to be some lines that is going to be noticeable here, because when you work with your Teflon tool, you will notice, I don't know if you can see there, maybe a very faint little outline there that is there. So you can go in, and this is where this tool comes in handy, where you can actually, you know, flatten that area there. But for the same matter, you can also use your stylus or this paper, the purple burnishing tool. This tool has so many names, and it's actually a very nice tool to use it. Once you start working with this little purple tool, you always wonder, Oh, how could I not have had this tool for so long? It's just one of those wonder tools. We were talking one time about if you have to go to an island, which tool is the one that you would take with, and I think this one got the most votes out of all the tools from everybody who is actually using this tool, because it is a stylus, so you can really refine with it, you can erase with it, and you can work with it this way. It is just a very versatile tool. But back to the stencil. So I'm pretty happy that everything has been done now, and the next step is we are going to remove our stencil. So what I would suggest at this point, and specifically because as you've seen there was quite a few spots missed, is to remove your stencil. Oh, never mind, it remove, but here it looks pretty good. Looks like everything has been done. But what I wanted to suggest was, if you have this and you do have your stencil like this, keep it attached on the one side and then lift it up and have a look, because you can always just let it flip back and then it is exactly on the right spot. So when it's a stencil like this, that is, the openings is fairly open, it's easy to replace it right on the spot. But when you work with a very intricate stencil, you might not be able to get it 100% right. Therefore, if you can, when you double check to see everything is right, keep the one side attached, flip it open like a book, have a look, and then you are just going to close it again. Okay, next step after we have removed our stencil is now we are going to work on the front of our pewter or our colored aluminum. I'm going to use my purple stylus and I'm just going to flatten it around here so that it don't flip up and down. So then you can also see those are the spots that when it was slipping, you have that. And this is where you're going to come in with this little tool and you are going to push it. Don't try and flatten it that way. I find it's always easier to flatten it towards the design than what I'm trying to flatten it away from the design. Is there a reason for that? I don't really think so. If it works better for you to start from there and flatten it to the outside, that's perfectly fine as well. It's what's working best for you. Personally, I just prefer doing it from the front or from the further end, working towards my design. Okay, so I'm going to go around and I'm just going to flatten all the sides here. And for this, you can also use your Teflon tool. I just find that with this little purple tool, I have a little bit more control. And as well, I don't try and go really fast. I try and work my way slowly through with this. And the reason I start on the outside with this specific one is just so that I can get my sides a little bit more flat. And from here, I am going to go in with my Teflon tool. And again, at this point, if you feel more comfortable using your metal stylus, that's perfectly fine. It is what works best for you. And now I'm just going to go very slowly around and I am going to refine this. Is this step necessary? And there I've just made a boo-boo. So I'm just going to push that back into the design. Is this step necessary? That again is going to depend on yourself. But if you would like to have it really neat, yes, it is necessary to do this. This colored aluminum is slightly thinner than what the pewter is, so it is a little bit easier to work with. And as well, when you have your when you remove your stencil, the parts in between is not as raised as what it would be when you use pewter, for instance. So that's why I say on the colored aluminum, this step might be not necessary, but out of habit, you know, when you work on the back, just come into the front and refine it. It's best practice. And with everything in life, if you keep on doing best practice first, that is just going to help you in the long run. So what I have done there on the previous one, if you look, when I was doing the refining there, can you see I had a little bit of an indent there? So I can go back to this side. And again, this is where this tool is going to come in handy. I'm going to go there and I'm just going to slowly work my way up and down, and I'm going to push it out, and I'm going to turn it around, and I am just going to refine it. So that's the other thing. When you make a mistake, don't panic. Just think, what can I do to rectify this mistake? Or, well, it's not really a mistake. It is just an accident. And all in this case, I definitely would have fixed it. But sometimes when your hands slip, it can actually add towards your design. Especially when it's a really, you know, a design that's sort of moving, that has a lot of movement in. That can contribute to the design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and I'm going to refine all of these. I have gone around and I have defined or refined around each and every one of them, and then I also went and I filled the back with some wax. This design is not really raised a lot, but still, because I'm going to sand it, I think I might just need that little bit of extra, because when you look at, where did I see that? At these ones, there were some spots over there that the design, now that I'm looking for one, I can't really see. So I did not put wax in this one, and when I was sanding, I had to keep on pushing it back out from the back. So that's another option that you can do, is if you don't fill it with wax, once you are done, you will just go in and with your tool or with your paper stump, you are just going to work it back out again so that it looked embossed. The next thing I did was I just took my paper stump and I have flattened around all of these. When you work with pewter, you will definitely get a more raised one. And before you would even start your refining, it is always good practice as well to go and flatten everything with your paper stump. When you look at your design and you feel there is here and there maybe an area like there that you think needs more of refining, you can just go back in and refine that. So I've also changed from my I've also brought in another hard surface, and this is a Perspex ones, and as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, I have actually market wax. So when I work with anything on a hard surface that has wax on, I would use this specific one for that. So next is we are just going to start sanding. And again, whether you want to sand the corners, that does not really matter, or the outside, it's your option. Another option that you have is to actually put your stencil back on. if I find the right way, before you sand, is to put your stencil back on. Just make sure that it's a good fit and you get it right the way that it was. Okay. Oh, and the reason why I'm doing this, I'm going to show you, it is once you start sanding. So there is a positive as well as a negative towards sanding like this when you have your stencil. First of all, there is a chance that you are going to damage your stencil because it's going to have some scratch marks. So if you sort of finicky kind of person and you don't want that, don't put your stencil back on, because I wouldn't say it's going to be damaged, but you know, it will definitely have some of the scratch marks. And all you're going to do is you're just going to start going in and you are going to start sanding the blue away. So again, when you have the stencil, you don't really have to be particularly you know, finicky on how you sand or pay attention, because you're just going to sand up right up until the edge of your stencil. I will do an area without the stencil as well, and then you can see it has the same effect. The only thing is, when you don't have the stencil there, you might get an area where you might actually go, you know, into where the lines is, but that doesn't matter. It actually just looks good too. Then it would have almost like a distressed effect. So that is what you will get when you have that. And yeah, so now I'm just going to continue on sanding. And you're going to go block by block when you are going to do this. Even when you remove the stencil, you are still going to try to do block by block. Another tip that I have for, you know, when you do this sanding, it can get pretty dusty. And yes, you can keep on blowing it away. That works perfectly fine. But another thing that you can do, and just get into those little corners there. Something else that you can do is you can just have a soft brush with you and you can just brush it away as well. So this is when you have the stencil on while you are sanding. Yes, there is going to be some spots, you know, where you're still going to miss it and things like that. So I'm also going to remove my stencil now, so you can sort of see already you know, how it looks, how the design is coming, and all those little marks, pin marks that is there, is little pin marks that has been picked up while I was working, and there was some little dusts and things like that on my hard surface. So you really have to be very careful when you work with that. So you can also just go in and, you know, just sand everyone. But as I said, when you do this, you have to know that you are also going to catch some of that in between the lines. Again, you know what, it's a nice little look. It is a distressed look. It will go faster when you do it that way than what you are going to do block for block. And if this is the kind of look that you are going for, you don't have to sand everything off. You can just leave some of it like this. It's your design, your choice. So actual fact, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to leave some of that. I'm going to do this to over there. I'm going to put my stencil back on, and I'm going to do that, and these ones I'm just going to leave like that. So I'm not going to bore you by doing that now in front of you, but yes, you can have an idea of how this is looking. I'm going to move on to the second one, just so that you can see a different way of transferring your stencil to your pewter or your aluminum, color aluminum, whichever metal you are working. So I'm just going to tidy up here and then move on to the next stencil. Finish the sanding on the blue one, and now we are going to work with our green one. So for the green one, I'm going to use the stencil on the back of the colored aluminum. So for the blue one, remember we had adhere it to the front, and now we are going to adhere this to the back. But before I'm going to do that, I just quickly want to trace my my guideline for the blank again. The only reason I do that, as I mentioned before, it is just so that I have a guideline of how to place it so that the design stays more or less centered. Is this thing centered on the colored aluminum? I doubt it, but it's just more or less. You can go in and you can really measure it on all the sides, but I don't really know. Okay, so again, I'm going to place my stencil. This time I am going to place my stencil on the back rather than the front of the colored aluminum. Okay, it looks more or less okay, and I'm just going to fasten it. And remember when I said, if you do not feel like, because the right way now to go in is to go in and start tracing each and every design or opening here of the stencil, so that you can see it in the front, because now we are going to work on the front, and we are going to push it from the front. Remember the blue one we did from the back. Now we are going to work on the opposite side of that. So this is one way that you can do it. Again, the same as the blue, we can continue on and we can do this. Alternatively, we can remove our paper pad and we can work on the hard surface, and now that we know where it is, we can actually just rub our finger over it, and there you see the design is coming out. So that's another way that you can do it if you don't want to go in and painstakingly do the tracing or the design. You can also, if you have a bigger roller, you can just roll it and it will be more prominent as well. Alternatively, if you don't have a roller, you can also use your paper stump and you can just push it over. And look there, the paper stump is actually working very well when you look at that. And you're using it flat as if it is a roller. You don't, I guess you can roll it, but by just moving it over like that, you get the same effect. So now it is going to be exactly the same as what we did with the first stencil. Alternatively, we are just going to work on the front now, and we are going to push it to the back. So what is happening now is we are having a debossed effect. So when you look at the two together, that one specifically, it is erased on the blue. On this one, it is de-embossed. And that one is embossed. Where you look at the back, now you can see it is into the cavity of the stencil. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to do this with each and every one of them. And again, so I have to make a note to myself so that I have to start on in the center. Usually when it is an embossing, it's sort of practice, but when it's a stencil, I don't know why I keep on forgetting to start working in the center here, but just keep on working your way out. And that is what I'm quickly going to do. I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to go in with the paper stump. I'm going to repeat all of that. The next step is I'm going to take my Teflon tool, and I am going to push it up against the stencil so that I can have neat and tidy corners and lines. And then when that is done, I am going to remove the stencil, but I will come back as soon as I have completed all the, pushing it out and did all the refining. I have flattened everything. I have refined it using my Teflon tool, pushing each and every one up against the corner, and it looks like these ones I have missed right at the edge. Yes, and now they look all really good. Okay, so the next thing is you can also use your fingers instead of the paper stump. Remember when we did the blue one, we went in with the paper stump. When the design is big enough, you can just use your finger to flatten it. And usually this goes way quicker than what the paper stump is going. And just make sure you get all of them. Okay, so that looks good. Now I am going to remove the stencil. Again, if you want to, you can keep the stencil on. It's always good practice to do the same thing. You can keep the stencil on and see if everything looks good. Yes, it looks good. And this is where you have to make the decision now. Does this look, so this is your front, and when you look at the green there, does it look neat and tidy enough for yourself, or do you feel you need to go in with your stylus and you just need to redefine it? So redefining is going up against there. So the same as what we did when we do embossing. We will go around and we will refine. So I'm going to do the middle one, and then I will show you the difference. And then again, it is your decision. It does look neat and tidy the way that it is, but then again, we are working with the colored aluminum. It is going to look exactly the same when you work with pewter. Best practice always is stay with the norm, and don't forget, like me, to start in the center. So when you look at the lines there, where's the camera now? I never can find the camera. So when you look at the lines of this one, you see there, it is refined compared to this one. It doesn't really show up very well. But there you can see you have a definite line here. It's not as prominent or as crisp. Crisp is actually the word I'm looking for. So these ones are definitely more crisp than what these ones is. So personally, I would say spend the extra couple of minutes and just go around and refine each and every one of them. I went in and I refined the outside. This one, it's very tricky because it's a long line, so you have to work very careful with that. That's why I didn't do it right in the beginning. I've waited until all the other designs of the stencil was refined. Okay, so the difference is when you look at the two designs. So when you look at the green one, you actually can see it looks like it has a frame that is raised or embossed. Where you look at the blue one, it does have a frame, but it is debossed, so your design ends higher than what your frame is. So you still have the frame, but it is just not embossed like with the green one. So I've gone ahead, as I've mentioned, I fold the blue one with wax, where I am not going to fold the green one with wax, just so that you can see you know, the difference when it comes to the sanding between having wax and not having wax in there. So I just want to put, oh, there's a piece. I'm just going to put this on here. And now I am just going to sand, because this is now done. We've pushed through, we flatten it, and now we are going to start sanding. And again, when you do the sanding on this, it all depends the look that you would like to go for. You can go in painstakingly, and you can go in section by section. And you can sand it like that. So you have to pay attention as well that when you do sand it like this, because there is no wax to hold it up like there was with the blue, once they are done sanding, you will have to go back in and you will need to push that out again. And the biggest difference, of course, is now the lines are raised and not the design self. So you can go, I think I'm going to do this one, maybe the 4 center ones I will do like that, but for the rest I'm just going to go over with a quick sand. So you will definitely sand some of the background away as well, but that, again, it's personal choice. It does really have a nice distressed look when some of the background is gone as well. The whole idea with using the colored aluminum is just to see that the placement of the stencil is making a difference on the design of the stencil. In certain cases, as I've mentioned right in the beginning, on some it is a deboss or an embossed effect, and that is basically the only difference between the two. But when you have something like this, you will definitely get 2 different designs, which is actually nice. It's almost a double bonus, you know, 2 for 1 stencil, if you think about it that way. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm also going to sand those 2, because then the center parts is really nice and clean and crisp. So I have sanded this one, and now we're just going to look at them side by side. So for this one, once the sanding was done, because there was wax in, it was pretty much solid. And for this one, because we didn't had wax in, it is quite dented in again, and it is bulging up. So I actually just quickly want to clean my surface here. I have so many antiseptic wipes in the studio because we had to sterilize everything after every use, so I have quite a bit of that. And now it's coming to good use. I'll clean my hands. So the next step that we're going to do is we're just going to push that out again. And again, you can actually use your finger for this too on the side, or you can just go in with your paper stump. You can also use one of those tools. I think, oh, that wasn't very good. That happens quite often. How frustrated do you get when you work on something and that happens? Oh, I get very frustrated. So I'm just going to go in and I am going to push everything out with my finger. And also when you work like this, try and sort of go in the same direction all the way, because then it's easier to see whether you have missed something or not. And I'm just going to come in for the straight lines. And there you go. See how that looks pretty good. Okay, there it made from the fold. It doesn't look so nice there, so I think I'm just going to go in with my paper stamp. So this whole area here, actually I think I'm just going to use this to just push it out nicely. Yep, that looks way, way, way better. Oh, and I forgot to flatten the middle or the center area. Okay, so there you go. And you can also come in from the front and you can flatten these areas as well, because that is just going to give you a nice crisp thing. So as for stencils, is it quicker to do a design with a stencil? It can be, but if you really want to pay attention and have a neat design, it is almost the same. It can take the same time as what you are doing a design from scratch, where you start with tracing your design onto the pewter or the metal that you are using, doing the embossing, turning over and refining. So yes, it can be, but it can also be the same. So the next what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adhere these to the blanks, and then after that we are basically finished. So when I'm going to adhere them to the blanks, I'm going to put my glue on here. So that's stencil basics. So the basics that you need to know when working with stencils is you need to adhere it to your pewter or your metal that you are working with. You have to make that decision whether you want to adhere it to the front or to the back, because you are going to get different effects. When you adhere your stencil to the front of your metal, you will have an embossed design. When you adhere it to the back of your metal, you will have a deboss effect. So once it is adhered, it doesn't matter whether it is front or the back of the metal, you are going to trace the design, or if you choose, you can just rub it over with your finger, whichever you're more comfortable with. From there, you are going to use a paper stump and you are going to push it up against the sides or the edges of the stencil. And once you are done with that, you are going to go in with your stylus or a Teflon Tip Tool, and you are really going to get it into all the little corners and really push it up against your design. Once that is completed, you're going to neaten it off, and then it's patina, blackening, or the sanding like we have done today. So basically, be careful or plan ahead before you add your stencil. This one with the same stencil, this one has been done on pewter again. It is placed on the front of your pewter, same design, place, or same stencil. It is been placed on the back of your pewter. So as you can see, it still looks the same, but there's definitely a noticeable difference between the two. And again, today's project, again, this one was placed on the front of the stencil. The stencil was placed on the front of the colored aluminum, and for this one, the stencil was placed on the back of the aluminum. So there you go, stencil basics. What you can also do is you can, once, I'm just going to go back to this, you can add some more detail to these stencils once you have removed the stencils or to this design. You can fill in the background, you can highlight some of these. When you look at this one, for instance, you can even do some more high relief in here. There is lots that you can do with stencils. This was just the beginning. We have literally just touched on the beginning and the basics of the stencils. So thanks again for spending time with me in the studio today. And always remember, the world of reality has its limits, but the world of imagination is boundless.